everyone. It's wonderful to be here today as part of the EMCC China 100 webinars. It's really my pleasure to be here. And I have been quite looking forward to this. One, because this is the first time I am addressing leaders in China. And, I think this whole effort to bring in diversity, to bring in global speakers, and to leverage on things like translation, etc., and asynchronous, in any asynchronous format, along with a live Q&A. I think all this is like very exciting. So this is going to be my first time with this kind of a format. And so I hope, this is going to be, as much as of a learning experience for me as I hope to offer to you. So as I was sitting together to really think about what I should be talking about, or, what topic I should pick on, that's when I said, this is a leadership audience, and I am a professional coach, a coach and a mentor. So I said, why not really try to bring the best of both worlds and try to offer something which leaders can take away from the world of coaching in a very, simple first principles kind of manner. So I have a presentation and I will walk you through that. And while I would have loved to pause in between for question answers, given the format, I think the last 15 minutes will be reserved for live Q&A, and I will be joining you back. So with that brief context, I am just going to get started and bring up my presentation. Just give me one moment. All right. So the topic for today is leaders embrace a coaching mindset. And I'm just going to quickly set out what we will be attempting to explore together in our next 40 odd minutes, I hope. There are, 5 sub-themes or, 5 blocks of this conversation. The first one is we will try to together unpack leadership. I know leadership is like, an ocean, an ever-evolving ocean, and you definitely can't do justice for it, to wait in a couple of minutes. But we will still try to unpack leadership so that we have a common language and some shared understanding. Having done that, we will then jump into the building blocks of leadership mindset. And this is something I'm going to share from my own experience as a coach and a mentor, and also a leader in working with leaders across industries and backgrounds. We will then jump into what's closest to my heart, which is understanding coaching. And building on that, like we did for leadership, we will look at the building blocks of what constitutes coaching mindset. And finally, coming to the heart of today's session, which is DELT, and I will tell you what the acronym stands for as we go along. And these are, this is essentially about 4 coaching principles for leaders that, can be applied by everyone. And then, of course, we will have questions and discussion, which, of course, will happen separately in the live session on the 15th. So let's get started. Leadership is, look at that visual, right? I mean, it is like opening that beautiful gift box, and we really don't know what's in store. And I think that's where, the whole excitement is. So I'm going to be sharing one of my favorite quotes on leadership, and I hope that would resonate with you. And that also then forms the context for what more I'm going to share about leadership. So, but as I do that, I would also invite you to think about, if there was a quote, or if there was a one-line kind of understanding of what leadership would be for you as a leader, please do reflect on it. So this is mine. As you can see, this visual, there are a group of trekkers, mountaineers who are going together. I see this as a team. And, and it is in that context that I've put this out. quotation on leadership by John Quincy Adams, which is, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader. So leadership is not merely about, really being, out there on top and, kind of giving a construct, giving instructions, sharing a vision, etc. But this is also about enabling others. I think the focus is on others as a leader. So it's about, enabling others to dream, learn, do, which is behaviors, and also simply become better versions of themselves. So, this is a question again for you, which is, that's why there's got that question mark, which is, leadership is complex and or challenging. There's complexity on one end. Look at that spider web. And there's also, even if something is not complex, it could be challenging. In my work with leaders across backgrounds, this is one thing that most people, in the space of coaching, finally it comes to it that, it's not easy. And it's very complex. It's very layered. And I agree, simply because leadership is not, there is no one rule book or playbook for leadership, right? Because the environment, the world in which we live in is so rapidly changing. When you think there is one approach that has worked for you, I would say, look at the pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic, the way it just changed and transformed the world, the way people could lead pre-pandemic is very different from the way leadership is embodied in today's world. So I certainly think, yes, and I empathize a lot with leaders that it is challenging, it is complex, also because leadership is not about necessarily working on, technical aspects of something, right? It is about human being. It is about leading people. It is about leading teams, businesses, societies. I'm just going to call out and list out a few common leadership challenges. And these are themes, again, this is not a theoretical list. This is a very lived and experienced list, by leaders and the kind of topics that come up in coaching. And I would invite you to think about these topics as we, set the context for this conversation. And then, of course, ask yourself, what else, do you want to add on to it? So starting from, how do I lead a team towards the common goals, to how do I lead people who are my peers? Very often, it's not necessarily vertical leadership. There is no reporting, and yet you're leading your peers. Suddenly, you are managing large teams. When you take on a larger leadership responsibility, the size of your teams does not go up incrementally, but it's a huge jump, number of people that one leads. So how do you make that transition? How to motivate people from various backgrounds, from different backgrounds. Obviously, everyone in your team is not from the same background. This one, again, is very common. Work targets, which is business targets, itself is very demanding, whether it's sales or innovation or anything else. Now, when as a leader, I have to be chasing or focusing on those targets, how do I even pay attention to people? It just seems like a lot. Then, of course, the very common challenge, which is, how do I effectively delegate? Because suddenly your span of control, the width that you're managing has gone up. And the only smart way of getting through that is to delegate, but then delegation also needs to happen effectively. This one is all about, this whole space of emotional intelligence, etc., which is, there are some leaders who say that I'm not very emotional. So how do I deal with emotions or strong emotions in a team? It's just very hard for me. This again is for people who are fast trackers or who are climbing up the leadership curve quite quickly, which is, I feel I'm much younger than my team and perhaps less experienced. This just takes away my confidence. Sure, I get that. And then as a new leader, how do I earn the trust of my people? And this is a big one. Yeah, because trust is something that is earned, is not a given just because you stepped into a role or just because you're been designated as a leader. So I would invite you to just take maybe half a minute and think about these and reflect on which of these resonate with you. Let's move on. Now we shift gears to this whole thing of mindset. And irrespective of what roles we play, personal or professional, mindset does matter. It matters a lot in the way you go about a role, in the way you show up in a role, in the way you are effectively embodying that role. And just for us to understand what I mean by mindset, mindset is nothing but a person's set of attitudes, their way of thinking, their state of being, their inclination about something. Yeah, it's the way you approach something. It's a collection of thoughts and beliefs that shape your worldview. How do you see the world? So, for example, how do you as a leader see the world? So it is about how we see ourselves, and not just how we see ourselves, but also what is it that we tell the world about who we are? What is it that we are expressing? Now, this is mindset. And if you really look up a dictionary, you will get synonyms such as outlook. So I could just say, instead of mindset, I could say outlook, or I could say mentality. Now that we have some shared understanding of what mindset is, I would ask you the question, why is it that mindset matters? And the answer lies in the fact that mindset allows you to figure out who you are, and also about where you're going, your direction, right? So your person and your direction, and also why. Mindset enables you to do that. And that's why it's so important. And to show up in the world, like I said, it's the way you tell the world as to who you are and what you're seeking to do. And as leaders, it's very important to put that intent out there. Yeah. And when doing all this, the showing up, it always starts with demonstrating personal mastery or self-leadership. Before we can lead others, I think being able to lead ourselves, being to be a better version of ourselves, is always the first step. This is one of my favorite collections, so to say. And again, has been built together, with a lot of reflection and a lot of work. So what I have called out here is, what are the building blocks? Like we said, right? I mean, the mindset, and mindset is about the way you approach something, the way you show up with something. I think you can break this leadership mindset into building blocks. So just to go back, leadership mindset is about the way we as leaders see ourselves, the stories that we tell the world, we tell ourselves, and how we show up, what our intent is. So what are the building blocks of this leadership mindset? What do great leaders do? Or how do they view their role, or how do they view their job, if I may, as leaders? So I've kind of put together 10 of these principles. You are free to add on what works for you, and what is your own reflection and learning in your own years of leadership. Quite self-explanatory, but I'll still run through them. The first one is enabling greatness. You remember we started with that quote, which is about enabling people to dream more. Yeah, to think more about themselves. So that is enabling greatness. I think every person has some greatness hidden in them. And I think leadership mindset, or great leaders, are able to enable this, not just for others, but also for themselves. Leadership mindset is also about creating a space for deep personal growth. So leader is not just one who's getting the job done and, who's focused on outcomes, business outcomes, etc. But also, can you create that space? You would have seen some teams where people thrive and, they have the space to grow. And then some others where there's barely, any space to even move around. The third one is a sense of responsibility towards one's own role and relationships. How do you feel about that role itself and about the relationships that you build? The fourth one is seeking challenging growth opportunities. So you would find leaders that you have worked with. These are people who go over and beyond and, are always looking for the next opportunity, are not content with, having reached or having delivered a certain outcome. The fifth one is, again, especially in the kind of world we live in today, which is filled with complexities, about being comfortable. See, one is to say, okay, the complexities are coming and then, oh my God, just feeling overwhelmed about it and finding your way. But what if we could just be comfortable with the fact that, yes, it is going to be complex. It's not a straight road. It's not a linear path. And, to navigate that. And I think very much connected to it. You can enjoy complexities only if you are as invested in the journey as you are in the destination. So leadership mindset is also about encouraging progress over chasing the perfect outcomes. We all want perfect outcomes. But I think it's also about encouraging progress because oftentimes the outcome itself is not in our hands. Leadership mindset is also about embracing, and the word is embracing, right? Not anything else. Experiences and experiments. Yeah. Do you give credit for that? Do you even invite new experiences? There's a lot of commitment towards diversity and things like that. But I think it starts from here. Are you willing to embrace these differences, experiences, and experiments? The last three is more about, how does a leader or how do we in our mind look at changes in the environment? One is really looking, at leadership as within ourselves and within our close circle of influence. And then there is about being connected and looking at yourself as a part of a larger system. And the first one in that is, it's important to even notice, yeah, response comes next. But can you notice that, that there are some changes that have happened? For example, the whole shift to, I think, noticing and understanding that people have become far more intentional about the quality of lives they want to live after, the whole, traumatic experience with the pandemic. And as a leader, if you, for example, cannot notice that, then you cannot even respond with progressive policies that, allow for people and recognize that need in your employees, that, they value that. So it's important to create that space for that as well. Connected to that is systemic being, thinking, and doing. Now, I'm not going to get into too much of detail on this because, we can run an entire session on how leaders can be more systemic. But it is simply about saying that, I am part of the whole as the whole is part of me. So I'm part of this larger, environment, larger society, larger country. And equally so, what happens outside is also affecting me. So right from your thinking, being, and doing, stemming from that space. And finally, leadership mindset is all about staying curious, vulnerable, and, just being authentic, being a real version of yourself. Yeah. Okay. So I hope this has, given you some thought starters. Of course, please feel free to add on your own mindsets, your own, building blocks. I'm going to move on to understanding coaching. And, in this segment, I think because, many of you leaders may actually have had some exposure and experience to coaching. And even if not, I'm just going to be covering some of that here. While, of course, we can have definitions, various definitions that different bodies like EMCC, etc., may talk about coaching. Here is one, simple way to understand coaching, which is, coaching is something that creates an environment. Yeah, look at it as an environment which is thought-provoking, safe, and creative. And we spoke about that in the earlier section, right? About the whole thing about leadership, creating space for growth, etc. For individuals, teams, and organizations. So coaching creates this environment. And why is this environment important? Simply put, in such an environment, people can grow and flourish. And everybody wants growth. When people grow, organizations grow, businesses grow, societies grow. And I'm calling this out specifically, the role of a coach. And, we can add on many things to it, but I would say this is really the essence of, I think the work and the profession people like me are into. And I would invite you to pay attention to this because we will be connecting the dots back with leadership. A coach is somebody who will help in, setting, clarifying, and maintaining the focus on what the client wants. So it's always about the client and their goals. A coach is somebody who will listen to the client with unconditional positive regard, in a very non-judging way. A coach encourages, supports, and believes in the client and their wholeness. Remember, in the previous segment, we spoke about greatness, leadership as a way to recognize greatness. A coach also challenges the client in recognizing where they may be holding themselves back or, really shining the light so that the client can be more self-aware. Yeah. And this goes back to another point, which is that coaching believes that clients are resourceful, they're whole, they're not broken. Yeah, all of that wisdom, all of what they're seeking is there within them. So this becomes important. The client, I think, the client is looking for solutions and strategies, and the coach really supports that. And it's not all about awareness and discovery, the role of a coach. It's also about being an accountability partner for what the clients say that they're going to do or, what they intend, converting intent into reality. And finally, I think this is really at the core of coaching, which is about being that person being that partner whom, the client can trust, being a trusted client partner at 3 levels. You can partner at the level of thought, emotion, and accountability. So I would say, in a nutshell, these are all the different dimensions of the role that a coach is playing. Now, like in every profession, coaching also has certain competencies, and competencies are nothing but, how something is done. So we said a coach would do all this, and a coaching as a profession can create all this. Now, how is this possible? How is this done? And this is what these competencies are. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into too much of detail, but, I would like you to just be in the know as to what are all those things that enable coaches to do the work that they do so effectively. So partnership, contracting, trust and safety, presence. We talk about leadership presence. It's something called coaching presence, active listening, powerful questioning, evoking awareness, facilitating growth, outcome and action orientation, commitment to self-development, and finally, coaching mindset, which is really what we are going to be exploring today. Yeah, so these are all the competencies, and obviously I have, highlighted coaching mindset. So I'm just going to take a few seconds here to pause and ask you, saying that by now, I'm sure you'd be seeing certain, that jigsaw sort of fitting, right? The leadership and coaching are very, very connected at a certain level. And, and I'm sure you can sense the connection by now. So let's move to coaching mindset. Again, like we spoke about in the context of leadership mindset, it is about one's outlook, way of thinking, and beliefs about coaching. So, what do you think about coaching? What do you think coaching can do? What do you think the role of a coach is? So these are all the things that go into the way, coach looks at coaching. And like the way leadership is, leadership mindset is about the way a leader views themselves. Coaching mindset is about the way a coach views themselves. So if, for example, you were to look inside my mind as to what's going on, that's, the coach's mind, right? That's coaching mindset. But there's also, a qualitative aspect to it, which is, this is about embodying a mindset, or this is about having a stance, an approach, which is open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. So there are 4 aspects to it, really. Openness, curiosity, how flexible, right? How flexible can we be? And always be client-centered. So the next thing is to look at what goes into coaching mindset. What are the building blocks, like we looked at for leadership mindset? And again, I would say there are 5 aspects to it. And if you see in that little, the diagram out there, you see coaching mindset, this openness, flexibility, client-centeredness, and curiosity. But if you really break that down further, these would be the blocks. The first one is about appreciating the client, or if, let's say, you were to replace the word client with people, right? Because why are we looking into all this? Saying that what are some of the things leaders can pick up from this? Yeah, from the principles of coaching and coaching mindset. Appreciating people's autonomy. Second one is ongoing self-development, ongoing learning and development, right? This is not about developing the client or developing the person in the team. This is about the leader or the coach here, focusing and being committed to self-development. Another beautiful aspect of, coaching mindset, a building block, and I think that's a core one, which is about developing reflective practice. Yeah, the coach as somebody who's a reflective practitioner. I would say one of my most favorite resources as a coach that allows me to be who I am and do the work. It is about my ability to stop, think, reflect, and, about myself, the work I do. And it's very important that we take time for this. The fourth one is about contextual and cultural awareness. Yeah, this is both about the self and the system that we are part of. Remember, we spoke about the system. And what do I mean by contextual awareness? It's to understand, where is this person coming from? In this case, of course, the client. But if a leader were to look at it, where is that teammate coming from? Or let's say, where is the peer coming from, right? And also culturally, not just the context, the business or other context they're operating within, but also, what culture are they coming from? Do they look at things differently? Do they view life differently? Do they view work differently? It's very important to look at that. And the final block, which again, I think is very, very important and many times neglected. And I find this in my work as a mentor for coaches, this thing about holistic preparedness, which is also about being invested in your own self-care. We spoke about ongoing learning and development, but this is a broader aspect of being holistically prepared, not just cognitively or for that session, but, just being prepared to take on the work of a coach. Now, I think it's a good time for us to move into the 4 core coaching principles for leaders. I'm also aware of time. So I will put this to you quite simply and, yeah, I would just say simply, yeah. And for you to reflect on. So if there is, something that you as a leader can take from the principle or the work of coaching, I would break it down to this, because otherwise coaching itself is a very vast subject, very vast profession. And, it takes months and years for people to, really become coaches and the work that they do. Yeah? But, I think there is a simple way to extract some of this. And that is my attempt here to give you that extract. So the 4 coaching principles, and that's what I was referring to as DELT, which is nothing but D stands for dialogue, E stands for enable, L stands for listen, and T stands for trust. So that's why I call it DELT, which is DELT. And let's look at the 4 principles. Principle number 1, and I know we're not starting with D, but we're starting with E. But, still, I think this is a good place to start if you were really to look at the 4 principles, which is leaders enable their teams to do some of these things. So as a leader, your first job, or first step to uncomplicate the work that you're doing, to go through that complexity, is to fundamentally understand your teams, and to be that catalyst, that enabler, that resource that allows teams to understand their work purpose, find a sense of meaning in what they do. Everybody wants to seek meaning. So I think leaders can enable this, to enable them to discover their highest potential, to realize their special gifts and greatness. We spoke about that earlier. Have a vision, a dream, and pursue that. And finally, enable your teams to be able to connect dots and see the big picture. Yeah? Because that's when you don't feel like a cog in the wheel. You feel like you're contributing to a larger universe. So I think the first big role leaders can play, and what you can take from coaching, coaches do this for their clients all the time, is this enablement function. And like I said earlier, you cannot really be able to do all this for others till you are also able to do this for your own self. So these questions can be always used for you also as a guiding light to figure out your own purpose as a leader. Yeah. So this is really, I would say, the why bit of leadership, or the why bit of people and work and their relationship with work. The second one is trust, and that's the T, right? So again, the T is coming in as a second principle, because once you've enabled people to see this, I think the next very important thing is to be able to not just build, but nurture trust in their team. So trust is not something that you can command. It is something that's worked on. It takes time. And I think, it's built over a period of time and intentionality. So, what all does this include? It's about creating a safe, supportive environment that produces ongoing mutual trust and respect. Remember, we spoke about safety in the context of coaching. It's the same thing leaders can do. Psychological safety, and there are many experiments to prove this, is one of the pillars on which great teams are built. Trust is also about being able to drive a culture of authenticity and openness, right? Where people can have real, honest conversations. Free expression of people's perceptions, thoughts, beliefs, etc. Trust is also about, in trusting teams, you'll find them quite happy to debate, to have differences, to have a conversation. Yeah, even though it's not about being singular. It is about embracing those diversities in a healthy way. Displaying empathy or concern for teammates. Also about always having the communication lines open, right? The moment communication lines get closed, trust gets affected. A trusting environment, also you will see, people being ready to embrace failures and take risks. Yeah, great things or wonderful things are not going to happen unless we are ready to try different things and go back to leadership mindset. Leaders are those who are willing to, take those chances to learn, to be creative. And of course, valuing diversity and inclusion. The third principle of DELT is listening. I always call listening a superpower for a coach and a leader. And how do leaders listen? Actively and deeply. What does this mean? Active listening and deep listening is all about focusing completely on what's being said, but also not, the not said things, right? Again, understanding the real meaning. Remember, we spoke about contextual awareness. This is it. In the context of that person's world, not from your context, but from that person's context. Listening to support self-expression. So the way we listen can allow for different things. And the first thing is to allow the other person to genuinely express themselves without any fear. Natural curiosity. Not listening to question, to challenge, but to be curious, to genuinely want to know more. Listening to the here and now, not sort of, listening and then thinking about, what lies much ahead. But right now, what's this person saying? What are they expressing? What do they want from you? Listening to emotional state and needs of the other person. sometimes behind the words, there's also unsaid emotions. Leaders and coaches are able to do that. Again, exploration of, words, emotions, speech, the pace, the tone, etc. And then whole person listening. It's like when you listen to somebody fully, like you're listening to me, what are you picking up from my whole person? What is the state of energy you think I am in? What do you think is running in my mind? What do you think I'm experiencing? So now this is what you pick up when you listen holistically beyond just my words. Sometimes I even think, when I speak to audiences who are not native English speakers, or, there's a different language in which we're trying to connect, I feel sometimes we don't even need a translation, because when you really are listening and the other person is really talking to, be understood, I think language doesn't matter. We can pick up the soul of that person so well. And then, of course, systemic listening, which I spoke to you about earlier. Final principle of DELT is, yes, you enable people towards their greatness. You create that, trust and safety. You listen deeply, actively. But all of this is also about facilitating dialogue, a conversation, right? It's like keeping the conversation going, where there is dialogue, and this dialogue is what enables awareness and growth for people. So you can have many conversations, right? But what do you want at the end of the conversation? How wonderful it would be if these conversations, every conversation that you have with anyone in your team, your customers, anybody, right, for that matter, could be thought-provoking, could just leave the other person in a, thinking about something that provoked them, right? Provoke them in a positive way to be able to build and add on that. What if the conversation could support greater creativity? People thinking of, smarter, better ways to resolve problems. Forward focused, right? It's not about, doing post-mortem and, nitpicking and kind of going back. Yes, you can do that to ensure errors are not repeated, but it's also about saying, okay, what next? What else can we do? In a coaching conversation, you would often find that, right? The coach asking, saying, okay, what else? What else can we do? What can we do next? And expansive conversations. Some dialogues can really sort of lock us down, right? Can make us feel very small. And then there are some dialogues that are so expansive that, that you feel like Superman or woman, right? You're kind of growing. And I think those are the dialogues that we're talking about here. And powerful questioning. The questions that you ask even, right? It may not be many questions, but a few questions. If your questions can be open-ended, evoke not just thoughts, but feelings. Reveal information for, that is required for that person to be more resourceful, to be able to move forward. Yeah, that's the kind of questioning that you want. Dialogue, I think, in any team is so important. It's like that key, to a high-performing team. It allows team members to remain engaged, checked in, right? Not checked out. It facilitates greater understanding between persons. Yeah. Imagine a team where there are different people, and then, a lot of them, the mental map is connected. Beautiful, isn't it? And of course, dialogue enables trust because of communication. What's interesting, and, as I come to the wrap up of my presentation, is that each of these principles of DELT is not isolated, so you would have heard me sort of even repeating myself, across these principles, but that's the beauty of it. Every principle builds on the other. So greater dialogue builds greater trust builds greater enablement for people, right? Greater trust allows for more listening. Greater dialogue can allow for more. So it is connected. So, I have often heard leaders, when I talk to them about this, saying that, hey, why can't I start with, building greater trust? Sure, you can, if that works for you. So this is just one way to do it. And, with this, I would like to kind of wrap it all together. If there was like a single slide that I could leave you with, it'll be this. Enabling purpose and potential, nurturing trust, listening to the team, and facilitating dialogue. More often than not, creates goal accomplishment with ownership. People own their goals, right? You don't have to push people to work towards their goals. They accomplish it, but also own it. There's wonderful collaboration and creativity is just flowing. There's also open communication and, navigating conflict better. It's not that great teams don't have conflict. Conflict is good, but it's also about how do we respectfully and, openly resolve that conflict. And it creates a strong culture of trust. Trust is not just, I think, a working principle, but it's also cultural. And all of these are ingredients of a high performance team. And this is my final question for you, which I'm happy for us to, really talk about in the Q&A, which is, as a leader, which of these 4 principles resonated most with you and would be most useful in the interest of your team? Please do put your responses in the chat box so we can talk about it a little. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, for your patience, and your support. And I just hope that this small presentation was useful in some way to you as a leader. Thank you very much. And these are my coordinates. Please feel free to reach out and connect with me. And now for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation on leaders embrace a coaching mindset. Thank you. It's very informative and inspiring. And we just saw much acclaim from the audience, and we also have collected some questions. And now let's move on to the Q&A. And I had an instant comment to the last question. And maybe maybe I will just read them. And it's in Chinese, and I will try to translate. I will translate it in English. For the last question, yeah. 那非常感谢我们 Vijay 女士刚才精彩的演讲。我们现在进入问答环节，大家如果有问题的话，可以随时把问题打在聊天框里。好，我们这里面有一个就是刚才针对 Vijay 老师就是最后一个问题的一个回答。As for your last question, the question, as a leader, which of these 4 principles resonated most with you? And we have a comment here. Yeah, I think listening to the team and facilitating dialogue resonate most with me. It helps me understand their perspectives and evoke creative ideas. And also, I can gain valuable insights and see what may have been overlooked. And but I wonder what's your answer, Miss Vijay? Okay, I'll first translate. 那针对我们刚刚最后一个就是问题，老师留下来的问题，然后我们这里有一位朋友，然后他做了一个回答，就是刚才的那个教练4项原则中哪项最能引起你的共鸣？然后你觉得哪项对你的团队最有帮助？那这位朋友说最有共鸣的是聆听和对话。那因为这样呢，可以让自己知道员工的想法，也能够激发他们的创意，同时自己也能够学到一些东西，看到一些之前可能被忽略的点。那就是特别好奇 Vijay 老师他的答案是如何 ？Yeah, please.
Can I take that? Yeah. So
yes.
I think that's a very good one, good answer. And just want to add on, dialogue is beautifully two-way, right? So as much as you as the leader get most valuable perspective and feedback, your team is also getting to know a little bit more about you and what's on your mind. And that's a beautiful opportunity to actually be able to take a stance on things, or simply just even inspire your team with your own being. So that would be my response. But thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Personally, for me, if I go back and I look at all my roles as a leader, it's actually a tough question, I mean, only after placing it, I'm realizing it. But I think for me, my go-to will be trust. I think when trust is there, everything else, I won't say falls into place, but it's a very conducive environment to build everything else. When trust is not there, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to we don't even listen to people we don't trust as much as we want to, leave alone dialoguing and talking. So that would be my own answer to that question.
好，谢谢刚才这位朋友的问题啊。那就是老师的也非常赞同这位朋友的话，就是对话，我们在这个管理团队中是非常重要的。因为作为领导者的话，如果跟团队一起对话的话，那么可以相互之间，你可以知道对方他所贡献的价值、你的观点以及对方的回馈。那你可以作为领导者，你可以了解团队他们的想法，那团队呢也同时了解是你的想法。在这个相互的对话碰撞之下呢，我们可以激发出更多的灵感跟创意。那老师自己呢，就是针对这4个原则，可能相对而言就是比较做出很难的抉择，就是哪个让你觉得最有共鸣，最有帮助的。那这里可能如果实在要提的话，那就是信任，因为信任的话是一切的前提。如果说你如果没有信任，很好的去就是信任，在团队里去建立一个信任感的话，那大家可能你就没有办法可能很好的去激励他们的目标跟潜能，也没有办法去很好的去在对话中能够相互去深入的聆听。那这个对话呢，也很难去顺利的进行下去。那对团队的各项就是我们的各项对话呀，我们的各项就是项目的推进啊，都会造成一定的障碍。所以信任呢是非常重要的。Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the second question.
Sure.
The second question, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, sure.
Yes. Here it is. Yeah, I'll read it.
Yeah.
那我们这里呢有第2个问题是，领导者在运用教练思维的时候会遇到什么挑战？ The second question is, what challenges may leaders face when adopting a coaching mindset?
I think this is a fantastic question. Thank you. I'm not sure who raised it, but thank you so much. I would say that embracing a coaching mindset is really like adopting a philosophy or adopting an approach. It's not necessarily a set of things you do immediately. It's more about the way of being, right? We saw about that. So anything which is more long-term, anything where you are working on your very being, I think takes time. And therefore, when you are trying to get short-term results or short-term outcomes or, just get activities done, something like this could actually prove a bit of a challenge because it is like coaching itself. Coaching itself is a long-term process. It's not a one-off intervention. You can't get result in one session. You can't really progress to where you want to go in a couple of weeks. It takes time. It's a mid to long-term intervention. So I think building a coaching mindset also takes a bit of patience, and I think a lot of clarity. More importantly, you should know why is it that you would want to embrace a coaching mindset. That's a good question to start. The challenge really comes because you know it's a good thing, or it makes sense, so you jump right into it and you say, okay, let me change my approach, or let me just pivot my stance a little bit. But if you don't know the answer for how it's going to help you or why is it that you want to pursue it, I think it can lead to a lot of internal tension because the system is out there putting pressure on you to do short-term stuff, which could even mean results in a certain very narrow way. Now, coaching mindset, for example, says be open and flexible. Now, being open and flexible may not always be the preferred approach if you just want to get things done. Yeah, you just want to direct and get action done. It may not be the right approach. But if you can stick it out, you can be patient about it, you can be clear about why you want to do it, it then can lead to long-term cultural shifts and, I would say, enhancement for everybody else in the system. So I think oftentimes it's our own lack of clarity and perhaps the impatience or the patience that is required that actually comes in the way. So those could prove to be challenging. And the reason I said it's a great question is because it is difficult. It is difficult when you make certain mindset or behavioral shifts, because that journey is going to be painful.
Yeah, thank you. 第二个问题是，就是领导者在运用教练思维会遇到哪些挑战？那这个领导者他在运用这个教练他工具的时候，其实有点像就是教练本身，因为他会是需要一个长期的合作。那他不是说简简单单的，你是可能说想要实现一个短期的成果，就是为了完成任务，这样那么简单。他也不是说我们可能进行一次教练会议，他就结束了的。那教练会呢，它是需要一定时间段的，可能短一点几周，但大部分可能会，比如说维持半年或者甚至1年。它会首先会需要你有一定的耐心。那在最初的时候呢，在最开始的时候呢，是一定要明确你是为什么要运用掉这个教练思维，也就是比如说像教练的最开始，你一定要知道你们为什么要走这趟旅程，你一定要非常清晰。就是你的目标，你可能是比如说最终想实现怎么样想法的转变，或者是行为的转变，这都不是一朝一夕能够完成的，是一个长期的过程。但是你知道这个它是必定会给你带来好处的，并且你也刚开始也知道你是通过什么样的方式去系统性的去实现这个，比如说行为啊或者想法的转变。那最重要的是你有一个非常清晰的明确的目标，并且知道这是一个长期的过程，要在这个过程当中你要去有很大的耐心。那明白这个呢，就是即便是在挑战是遇到的问题再大，但是你的方向是明确的，那么你还是能一步步的朝这个方向，然后直到达到这个目标的实现。Okay, thank you. And Ming has a question.
Yes. Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Hello.
Okay. So, hi, Miss Vijay. So, thanks for your sharing and so appreciate it. For the first question, I vote for trust as well. So, but I have a new question. My question is from one question from your slide.
Yeah.
As a leader, I'm not that kind of feeling type person. So how can I deal with those strong emotions? So I'm really curious about your answers.
I love this question as well because this is reality. All of us as human beings, we have our preferred orientations, right? Some of us, we think more, we're more head driven, and then there are others who are more feeling driven, they're more heart driven. But I think a wonderful balance of leadership will be to really be a good mix of head, heart, and maybe hands even. So I would actually say this would be a great opportunity if you are a leader and you perhaps are not a very feeling person, it doesn't come to you very naturally. It's a great opportunity to, I wouldn't say develop, but open that out for yourself. Just to get a little bit more touch with your own feelings. And let's look at it this way: when we are all born, or before we get raised or we get built in a certain way, all of us have feelings. Even little babies have feelings, but I think somewhere along the way they get blunted a little bit. And this could happen with cognitive abilities also, with the head as well. So I would say, the reverse is also true. If you're a leader who is more a feeling leader, a more emotion-driven leader, I think it's important to invite yourself to also think and reflect a lot more. Yeah. So I think the point I'm trying to say is it is a great opportunity. It is, remember, leadership is getting out of your comfort zone to take small steps. And before you can hold space and connect with emotions and feelings of people in your team, connect with your own self, with your own emotions, and feelings as much as you do with thoughts. I think that's a great starting point. And once you do that and you're comfortable, that just allows you to, I think, be open to emotional dialogue, or let us say, people who talk through their emotions, or even be perceptive to emotions. I think the first step in being comfortable with emotions, difficult or not, is simply to even recognize that, yes, for example, to say, okay, somebody in your team has had a very significant personal loss. If you're not able to connect with those emotions or even recognize them in the first place, you're going to be missing something very big. And it's not as complicated. You don't necessarily need to play the role of a coach or a therapist really working with those emotions, but can you just be human? And I think that's the beauty of leadership, our ability to simply be human. If there was another human being in front of you, somebody in your family, or even a friend who was sharing something quite deep and personal, what would you do? You wouldn't brush it aside. You would at least listen. So I think before, kind of going on a deeper path of trying to be a very emotionally intelligent leader, that comes second. Start with yourself, and be in touch with your own emotions. I think that's a great place. And naturally, you will start being aware and acknowledge the emotions of people around you. Could be your teammates, could be your stakeholders, customers, anybody in your ecosystem. And the flip side, or the happy flip side of this, is that even in your personal life and your relationships, you will show up as a far more emotionally intelligent and aware and connected human being. Does that answer your question, Min? Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. Yeah, I totally agree what you said. Yes. I think heart driven is best and is better for our relationship in the society, and also is good for our family relationships. Thank you very much. Yeah.
好，那第三个问题呢，是针对就是我们刚才说领导者他可能会常常出现的一些问题，比如说有一些领导者他可能本身并不是那么就是情绪化的人，或者是就是情感触觉并不那么深的人，那这种情况下他该去如何应对团队里可能出现的一些比较激烈的情绪？那这个问题呢，就是因为我们每个人是不同的，有的人可能说在生活或者工作当中，他可能更比较是理性的，他可能真的是就是大脑里的思维它在主导作用。那有些人更比较的是可能感性的，可能是他的感受更明显一点，有的人呢也会说用心，可能在比较更多的会触动自己的内心这方面。那我们作为领导者，其实最好的呢是能说，不管在理性啊还是感性之间，如果能取得一个平衡是最好的。但是我们人，不管是哪怕是领导者，他终归是人可能都会有自己的一个特质。那这个其实面对这种情形呢，如果说你不是一个比如说感受力特别强的人，但是你会遇到了一些可能这方面的问题的时候，你首先呢就是一定要把它当做一次机会，可能一次学习的机会，就是你要打开自己的心扉，去走出自己的舒适区。那首先呢，第一步是你要去能够跟自己的这个感受、自己的情绪产生一个连接。你首先可以跟自己去进行一个对话，了解自己的这个感受。那然后呢，再去跟就是对方去交流。那对方呢，其实不管什么样的情绪呢，我们也有一种开放的姿态面对，因为不管是什么样的情绪，它其实是既然存在的话，它可能其实都是合理的。那我们作为领导者是人，但我们也不是说可能有时候不是教练，也不是一个治疗师，能够去说帮助对方去治理他的可能一些心理啊情绪方面的问题。我们更多的呢就是做一个很好的聆听者，去打开自己的心扉，然后去就是用平常心一样去 一种平常心的状态，去更好的去聆听对方，这样呢，就是能够帮助我们去更好的，然后接受到对方他想要表达的信息，而就是不被可能我们的情绪或者是其他方面所影响。Okay, thank you very much. Maybe the time is very limited. Maybe we have, also we have several questions, and maybe we have the last question. Okay, here is a question. 那我们这里时间问题，我们看最后一个朋友的提问是说，如何衡量领导者运用教练思维是否有效？Okay, the last question is how to measure the effectiveness of leaders' adoption of coaching mindset.
Wonderful. This is actually a very tough question because I think this goes into a larger, it reminds me of the question, how do you measure the effectiveness of coaching itself? Yeah. But let's kind of keep to the question. I find two measures very useful, and I can also tell you this from personal experience. So let me take a minute and narrate a bit of, a small part of my coaching journey. When I started off as a coach, I think while I did understand these ingredients of coaching mindset in different ways, I think, I kind of was not very conscious about it as a concept, right? There's something to work towards. I mean, nobody told it to me like this, or, spoke about how it fitted in, etc., etc. I did not even ask those questions saying, how do I view myself as a coach? Or, what is it that I seek to do? What's the big, what's the big question here, right? What's the big purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And those are very, very important before you can even understand what coaching mindset or leadership mindset is. Yeah. But I think somewhere along the way, I realized the way I started coaching, the way I showed up as, a mentor or a leader was very different when I started embracing more and more elements of the coaching mindset, which is my own clarity, which is, my ability to not be very, very attached to a certain standard way of, things flowing, being just more open, being flexible, all these things. Yeah, the way I coached started changing. The way my clients or even other stakeholders experienced me was very different. I was so much at ease the way I was doing that. So the point I'm trying to say is the greatest effectiveness or the greatest measure is that the leader will find that role. Yeah, because we're talking about a leader's adoption of coaching mindset. We're not talking about a coach's adoption of coaching mindset. A leader will find themselves far more comfortable and far more at ease with the different dynamics of leadership. The complexity will not trouble them so much. They will be able to take it as it comes. The way they, I think, look at others or they engage with others changes. So internally, something shifts, something changes. And I think that is the most powerful way of measuring effectiveness. Does the leader feel something has changed, something has shifted? And while you might say this is not an external measure, it's okay. I think everything need not be an external measure. Sometimes the strongest measures are the internal measures. So the leader's self-assessment, on a journey of embracing something like coaching mindset is very powerful. The other thing that always, I look for is the leader's immediate stakeholders. And let's say even a simple, oral or verbal kind of feedback, asking people, how do you experience me on these parameters? And, looking at how people have seen that shift or changed or experience, because this is going to translate in the way the leader is showing up with other people. Yeah, in the way he or she is engaging with other people. I think that feedback, again, can be extremely powerful. And I think the third one is usually when you adopt something like coaching mindset, you're not very attached to outcomes. That does not mean that you don't have a goal, or you're not result driven, you're not performance driven. No, I think that's not what I mean. I mean you're not attached. You even let's say, and we saw this during the pandemic, people changed and shifted their goalpost easily, and maybe something bigger and something better emerged. So they're at least able to look beyond a very narrowly defined goal. So those leaders who are not very narrowly attached to goals or outcomes, but I think they look at progress in direction. So the direction is important, not necessarily a very, very specific goalpost. So people who embrace this, they're open to that. They're not so, they bounce back easily. They just are more resilient, yeah, because they're not so attached to narrow outcomes. So these are, I think, 3 ways by which one can measure. But let me tell you, at the end of the day, it is a very, very internal measure, because mindset itself is the way you view yourself, not how the world views you, how the world views you.
Thank you. It's a great answer. I think it's beautiful that we can measure from ourselves, from our inner state. Thank you. 那最后一个问题是关于领导者他如何就是衡量，比如说运用教练思维的这个有效性。那我们 Vijay 女士她结合了自身的经验，她也讲了自己的就是刚开始做这个教练营的心得，然后跟我们分享了这个问题。那这个衡量呢，主要有3个方面。首先第一个方面也是最重要的。那Vijay 女士她就分享了，首先她分享了自己的经验，就是她刚开始做教练的时候，可能那个时候对教练的可能能力啊、各种框架呀、各种原则模型，她可能就是都不是太理解，然后那个时候可能对各种概念呢也不是说太明晰，然后那个时候对自己可能做这份职业，他就是为什么要做这些啊，以及如何做，可能都没有一个就是很好的一个思路。那包括就是我们说，不管是教练思维还是领导力思维，都有一个很重要的点，就是关于我们如何看自己。那个时候呢，他的问题就是对这些问题其实都没有一个很清晰的线索。就是虽然可能很多概念都了解了，但是因为可能就是当时经验比较少，可能说对他而言其实有很多的困惑。但是渐渐的呢，就是随着他慢慢的做这份工作的时候，他就是慢慢的发现，就是可能做教练，其实包括跟做领导者相互，他们之间其实有很大的也是不一样的，也有各有各的难点。然后他在这个过程当中，他渐渐的对各种比如说标准啊，以及比如说我们做教练的时候要保持一个灵活性，然后在对话中要保持一个开放的态度，以及建立信任感、安全感等等。他渐渐的明晰了这个方向，也找到了这个感觉，他的自己做教练的这个方式也不断的发生了变化。那他在这个过程中，他的教练方式也就是越来越能够从容的去应对客户的各种各样的问题。那这里就有一个最大的感受，就是我们作为教练自己，他能够就发现自己在这个过程中变得越来越舒服了。那这个其实是你一个我们做比如说教练，你衡量你这个做教练的一个效果，也是一个很好的标准。就不一定可能从外在的哪个标准去衡量，从我们的内在衡量的话，这是一个非常应该说是一个非常美丽的标准。那从领导者运用教练思维的有效性，其实也是同样的。然后领导者你去发现自己在这个角色中，然后运用到了一些教练思维，可能运用到了教练的工具方法。你在这个过程中，你感觉管理团队越来越得心应手，然后团队的大家成员可能凝聚力越来越强，然后大家做这份工作的时候，就是大家之间的互动参与感都变得更加好，然后大家都更加的积极，然后大家的这个工作表现也越来越好。那从这个程度，我们也能够衡量这个方法的有效性。那第二点呢，就是比较简单。第二点怎么说？就是领导者，你可以去问身边的你的同事、你的团队成员，可以去寻求对方的反馈。就是这段时间，我可能作为领导者，我运用了教练的工具，然后你觉得就是我们可能我运用了这个方法以后，我们团队有没有什么变化？那我有没有什么变化？然后第二个就是可以从身边的人去衡量你的做这个教练运用教练思维的一个有效性。那第三个呢，就是我们这个有效性可能说，因为它就是你 除了因为我们确实是不管是做什么，我们都有一个目标，都要去追求一个成果。但是呢，就是我们也不完全说只依赖于你这个目标过程成果完成的怎么样，还要一个注重这整个一个过程。当你就是抱着一个比较自然就是开放的心态，然后就是比较灵活的一个心态去享受整个过程的时候，你也能够感受到就是这个整个变化。然后哪怕这个成果可能最初没有就是不如预期的那么好，但是在这个过程当中，大家呢也是都是能够学到有所收获的。以上总结3点，就是衡量领导者运用教练思维的有效性。第一个是我们从领导者自身的一个感受出发，你能够感觉到自己管理团队更自如了，大家的状态都更好了。那第二个就是身边你团队成员大家的反馈，或者是可能公司里其他同事对你包括你团队整个大家的状态的一个反馈。第三个，那就是除了这个结果，然后包括整个我们项目的各种任务它的一个进展，就整个进展的一个最终情况，你可以从这个方面来去衡量。Thank you so much for your answers. I think it's so great question and also so great answers. Thank you again for your wonderful presentation, and thank you again for your support for ENCC China. It's been a great honor to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, IC. Thank you, Min, and thank you, Fisher. It's a privilege to be here with all of you today. And IC tells me that so many of you are listening in. It really is a privilege to be here, and I hope this was useful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, and looking forward to have our future collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Have a good rest of the day. Bye bye. 好，那以上呢是我们 Vijay 女士今天精彩的分享。好，那今天呢，就是 Vijay 女士这场讲座呢，我们也有回放。那大家如果需要的话，可以扫屏幕上的二维码，大家可以去查看。就是本期讲座我们有内容回顾，以及也有视频的回放。那大家可以扫屏幕上二维码，然后到时候可以关注。好，在这里我们做一下我们下期讲座的预告。那下期讲座是在4月1号的晚上7点到8点，由来自智利的 Paul and Water 教授，他给我们带来的话题是导师技术助力企业领跑 AI 新赛道。那这次呢，他会讲到就是可能如何就是我们的最新的AI 技术可以如何运用到我们的导师技术当中，然后帮助我们企业然后实现更好的发展。好，感兴趣的朋友可以扫屏幕上的二维码报名。以上就是我们今天讲座的全部内容，非常感谢大家的观看和参与。那我们下期再见。对 ，Zoom 先别关。